if that would take forever, but if there's any specific questions you have.
I do.
Yes.
I noticed that when I was doing some homework, I did one under Windows Forms app .NET framework, and then another one was Windows Form app. That's it. Like, that's all it said. Is there really a big difference between those two?
Yeah, it's actually a great question. The way we used to develop apps in Windows was just native apps, like they would run as a native executable to the operating system. And that's the way it was done for decades. And then about 30 years ago, Microsoft decided to try to copy Java, and they created something called the .NET infrastructure, which basically puts an intermediary between the processor, the hardware, the actual CPU, and the software, and it's called a client language runtime, very similar to Java's Java virtual machine. The theory being that the APIs would be isolated from the hardware, and therefore we could create an application that would work regardless of whether it was an Intel processor, an ARM processor, or whatever.
Huh.
So it failed miserably.
Okay.
But Windows Forms is the old school way of developing applications, and it's not the new way. I mean, I wouldn't recommend learning Forms necessarily, with the exception of what just happened recently. Microsoft came out with something called .NET Core several years ago, version 1.0, then it went to 2.0, went to 3.0, and it slowly gained traction. And they just integrated it into .NET Core 5.0. So this basically allows you to develop applications in Windows Forms in the new .NET Core architecture. .NET Core so far has been a success. What that allows us to do now is truly write applications that can work on a Mac, a Linux server, or I'm sorry, Linux computer like Ubuntu, or any Windows computer that supports .NET Core. That's why there's two different versions of it. So theoretically, one of them is the ability to create an application in Linux, and the other one is just the standard Windows version.
Okay. Thank you.
It's a little, I apologize. I know it's a little complicated. There's a lot to it, and it's very, it is a little confusing, but let me show you this real quick. I'm running Windows 11, and you'll actually see in Windows 11, I'm actually running something called the Windows subsystem for Linux, and it's integrating Linux into Windows. So Microsoft is trying to blur what an operating system is or needs to be, because they don't make any money on the operating system. So they don't really care if you're using Linux or if you're using Windows, other than the fact that they want your data. So what Microsoft is doing is trying to make everything compatible with Linux, and in some cases Mac as well, which is nothing more than FreeBSD. So if you look, this what you see on my screen right now is actually a Linux box, and I program Linux actually inside of Windows 11 using Visual Studio. It's very interesting, actually. You can create graphical applications in Windows Forms applications that actually run from within Linux using the .NET Core.
Cool.
Yeah, it's really, really neat. And by the way, I'm trying to get my class moved over, the ASP.NET course, to Linux, primarily because I want to show everyone that development in C# is no longer limited to just Windows development.
Yeah.
But it's a little advanced. There's some bugs, some issues, so I'm trying to work through them all. But even SQL Server, by the way, which is a Microsoft product, runs entirely in Linux, and it's a very popular app in Linux. Okay, so anyways, with that, I apologize. I went off on that a little deep, but
No, it's cool. Thank you.
any other questions?
Yeah, well, so for all of our assignments, we're just using the one that says .NET Framework at the end, right?
Actually, believe it or not, the course was based on no .NET at all. You're actually technically supposed to use just forms. So if we do forms. Oops.
Okay.
This is the one you're technically supposed to use. However, I have tested the .NET Framework version of forms, and I have no problem with the basic C# language and using those Windows forms. In fact, C#2, we don't use forms.
Okay.
C#2, we use Universal Windows apps, which are the store app, basically.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
No problem. Matter of fact, since you've been using that, we'll continue using that. Also notice that, and you got to be really careful. I have students occasionally do this. There's two different forms apps.
Yeah.
One is VB and one is Visual C#. Visual Basic is dead. I wouldn't recommend spending any time learning Visual Basic. Make sure you select C#.
Okay.
And save file dialog. Okay, just give it a name. Place the solution and the project in the same directory. This is important because when you're submitting the project to me, I need the solution so that I can actually run it. Okay. For some reason, I have 5.0 installed on this machine, and for some reason, it's not showing up. I'm not exactly sure why. But make sure you're at least using 4.7.
Okay.
Karen, you okay?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm following.
By the way, I apologize. I just realized why my dogs are annoying me. I have a mango sitting on my desk and they want it. Let me give it to them real quick and lock them out. Here. Here. Howdy. Howdy. No, I want you out of the bedroom. Come on, you have it. Howdy. Here. Sorry about that. First thing I want you to do is we're going to just a very common failure, and I see students running into this all the time. In fact, you guys may have actually already run into it. Let's go ahead and just put a button from your common controls over here and drag it onto your form.
Okay.
And then double click on the button. And that drops you over to some code to allow you to create event code for when a user clicks on that button.
Mm-hmm.
However, students tend to do that and then go over here, and I apologize, I'm back on the form, and they go into their properties. So if you click your button, go down to properties, and they want to use the word save, the save file dialog, and for the name, we give it a name.
Mm-hmm.
I actually want you to go through this if you want to follow along.
I am.
Okay. Anyway, I think in the chat window, they told me there, not they didn't tell me, I read that you can actually tell me to slow down, speed up, shut up, whatever. But I don't see how to do that.
What?
You guys have those options on your chat?
I don't see that.
I know for a fact they have something like that now, basically so that you guys can help, let me know if I can go ahead and move on or if I need to wait, that type of thing.
Oh. I could just talk.
Was that?
I could just say something.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, especially
Yeah, I'm
since
following too.
double click the save button again after you change the name.
Mm-hmm.
Oops, hang on, I gotta go back. And students will kind of panic over the fact that it says button 1, so they'll rename it. Actually, yeah, the save button. There's 2 problems with that. Really? I'm sorry. I apparently didn't latch my door. Actually, after you rename this, it's no longer going to work. And the reason why, if you go to your form itself, you'll see that this also happens where you can't actually view the form. That's because when we're developing in Visual Studio, Microsoft is actually creating code for us. The representation of your form and your buttons and your list boxes that you're creating are nothing more than code. You could easily create a Visual Studio application, C# application, Windows Forms application, whatever the case, without actually using the UI at all. So if you look over here, you'll see the form designer.cs. This is all the code that is developing or designing your form. And you'll actually see an error here because it's creating a event for the button.
Mhm.
So there's 2 ways to fix this error. One is to go ahead and rename it here to match the name you have in the other window. Or delete everything and just re-click on the button. So like if you deleted this line, and then go back to your, oops, hang on. And delete all your stub code here. Go back to your form. Oops, hang on. Build. Sorry, I didn't save it. Let me delete it again. Okay, yeah, whatever. Now if we go back to the form, you'll see the form. I can double click on the save button and now it's all functional.
Okay.
Also, something else that students are missing when they're submitting, and again, I'm not targeting specifically either of you two. I'm just saying in general, 95% of the students are not completing the assignment as required by the rubric. So let's go back to our form and let's go ahead and finish off the save file dialog. Let's create a text box and put it at the very top. And that's where we're going to put our number. Another button to close our form next to the save button. By the way, that's a reason .NET and Windows 11 are not necessarily conducive to me showing you how to use it. That's a bug. Let's do a list box, which is what we're going to use to show the numbers. By the way, this is just an example as why I recommend not using .NET. Windows Forms is a much more stable platform.
Okay.
Okay. Let me know as soon as you're ready to move on. Karen, you can also text me.
I'm ready. I've got everything.
Was that Marie or Karen?
Oh, that's me, Corinne. Actually,
I'm ready too. I'm just not sure what to name the text box or the list box.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I said I'm ready too. I'm just not sure what to name the text box or the list box.
Yeah, I'm getting ready to go through all those. So give me one second. Let's go ahead and do the things that I need you to do before we actually name everything. Actually, we name it as well. Go ahead and change your form, give it a name. We're not going to programmatically manipulate the form, so the actual code name doesn't need to be modified, but you can actually change the form so that it has a more representative name. You can actually change the icon too if you wanted, but it's good enough for now.
okay.
Text box to the very top of your properties. And let's call the text box. And I don't know why that's so hard for me to define a name for it. What I'm looking for is basically the number of values that we want to store in the text file. So we'll just call it count text box.
Okay.
Also, there are multiple different naming conventions. This is just again, camel case notation. I think the book covers camel case and also, what other ones did the book cover?
It said Pascal.
What is that?
Pascal.
Pascal, did it do Hungarian?
No, I haven't read that yet.
Okay.
Unless I missed it.
Hungarian was the one Microsoft used to use, which basically you would use a prefix to define what the object is. So like it'd be like some sort of abbreviation for label, like LBL, and then what the label was going to store. I'm a huge fan of that, but they've moved away from it.
I like that too. I've done that before in the past, not even thinking about it being Hungarian or.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll call it text box. We'll call this one numbers list box, which by the way, I'm kind of cheating because I'm technically doing just the opposite of Hungarian, but that's fine. Save button, and then let's change our close button to, you can name it exit button if you want. Okay, now here's what students aren't doing, and it is required. It is represented in the rubric for the assignments, and that is actually setting your default button, your close button, your escape button, your tab orders, and also shortcut keys for your various buttons. So first thing we'll do is go ahead and modify the tab order, and when you run an application, the tab order by default should be pretty close. But in this case, it's not. So you notice when I tab, it starts here, goes to close, then to the list box, which we don't even want it to focus on the list box, and then save, which should be the second button or object selected when you hit tab.
Oh, yeah.
So if you go here and look at the tab order in the properties, Oh, hang on, I gotta make sure, because we're in .NET. Yeah, it's still the same, okay. By the way, I'm new to the .NET forms. So if there's some minor changes here, I apologize, but I'll figure it out.
Okay.
So let's go ahead and give the text box a 0, because that's where we want to start. The number box, we'll just give it a high number, because we're not even going to use it. Well, below this, we're going to actually set the tab stop to false, which it should theoretically, well, it does, at least in normal forms, bypass the tab. So the tab index has no merit. For save, we want it to be 1 and then close 2. Go ahead and test it, run it, and make sure that it does in fact do proper tab orders.
Okay, yeah, got it. Yeah, I wasn't doing that before.
It should default to your text box, and then you change the order.
Okay.
Next thing that students are missing is when you click on your form, there's 2 properties that we're going to set by default. So if you scroll up to the top of your properties and you see an accept button, this is the button that fires automatically. So the click event will fire when someone hits enter when they're on your form. No matter where you're at on the form, if you hit enter, it'll save, which is what we wanted to do. So we'll just select the save button.
Okay.
Same thing for close. So we want a default escape button. Find it, I apologize. I forget where it's at. Give me a second. If you find it before me, that's fine. Cancel button right there. So under cancel button, just select the close button. Go back to your form, double click on close, just write the code to close the form. By the way, another common question I get is the keyword this in this code. When we're working with object-oriented programming languages, we're developing classes, and these classes have methods and properties, some public, some private, some shared only between itself, and sometimes shared between other classes. But what this is when we create an instance of one of these classes. So basically it gets created in a memory location and it becomes something. So like the class would be the definition of like a car, right? We know a car has 4 wheels, we know it has a steering wheel, brakes, accelerator, all that. Those are all the methods and properties of car. But the car in your driveway is a physical instance of that car. So the car being the class, your Honda Prelude, or Honda Civic, whatever, sitting in the driveway is an instance of that class. The keyword this represents the instance of a class that's running. So we basically use this.close in our class, which we don't know what this is going to be until it's created. But then you get in your Honda and you press the accelerator, you're saying this dot press accelerator. Right? Because you're in that car at that time. Programmatically, we just don't know that your Honda Prelude is going to exist. So in code, we just use the keyword this, and that assumes then any object that's created, I don't care what car is out there, the Ford F-150, whatever, this dot method or property represents that particular car at that particular time. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. By the way, if you already knew that, I apologize. It's a common question.
No, I appreciate it. I like the comparing it to being in the car,
Yeah.
because like I get it, but it's still kind of abstract to me. So hearing stuff like that helps.
Good, good. Okay, so now let's go ahead and run the project. Apologize, my screen sharing things in the way. And just hit the escape key and notice that your application now closes. And if you put in a breakpoint here, sorry, we run it again. You'll see the breakpoint stops at this.close because the escape actually ran that cancel button, the close button.
Cool.
Again, we're not done because there's more that students are missing. The next thing that's missing is the shortcut keys. Shortcut keys are fairly easy, but they allow you to use like an Alt or Control to actually automatically select the button. So if we select our text, sorry, is that my dog or is that your dog?
That's not my dog.
Click on save and then go down to your text. And put an ampersand in front of S. And do the same thing for close. Now this is kind of buggy. So I do know there are bugs associated with it. Again, it seems to be working right this second with my current version of .NET and Windows 11, but you actually see an underscore show up in front of the S and in front of the C.
Oh yeah.
And then when you run it and you hit the Alt key and hit like Alt C, it'll automatically run the code.
Oh, cool.
Now, this is a little buggy because if you watch, if I hit Alt, that's supposed to go away when I release Alt, but it's not. At least it works. Is yours going away after you release the Alt?
Yeah.
Mine's not.
Yours is not. By the way, Microsoft may have changed it in a certain version of .NET. I don't know, but it's always stopped once you release the S, because if you hit C after you release the Alt, the close isn't firing, so it shouldn't be highlighted as an option. But anyways, no big deal. Any questions?
No.
Okay, next, if we go down here to save, I don't want you to drag it over here, but this is also a little confusing sometimes. We can actually take a save file dialog, drag it over, and give it a name here. And it doesn't show up on the form. It actually shows up below the form. That's because there are no, there's no user interface for save file dialog, unless you actually fire off a method associated with save file dialog. So that's a common practice as well. Like there's a bunch of things we work with in terms of databases that allow us to actually create objects, or sorry, create controls that actually don't have a UI. Maybe they'll store data so that we can actually change the order or filter it, whatever. I'm not going to use that. I'm going to delete it because I'm just going to write the code out manually when we actually do the save. So go ahead and double click on save. Okay, now this is basically this part of the assignment. Everybody, or most everybody in the class, has been successful in getting this part of the assignment completed. I'm just going to add a couple more things that you might want to add to your project. I know you've already submitted it. This will not impact your grade as long as you've met the requirements of the rubric and the description of the assignment. But let's go ahead and create a stream writer. Stream reader. And the save file dialog. Notice that by default, those are underwritten in red. That just means that we don't have a using up here. And you'll see a bunch that we aren't even using. So if you mouse over and show potential fixes, it'll give you its best guess at what the namespace is that you want to use. Oops, hang on. I did something wrong here. Oh, I apologize. No, that's right. Give me a second, I gotta figure out what I'm doing wrong. I think this is related to .NET, so I got to figure this out versus a normal Forms app, and I'm not exactly sure what it's asking me for, because this is without a doubt the proper syntax to create an instance of a save file dialog. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to go back and sheet. I apologize. I'm going to go back to form. I'm going to go to save file dialog. I'm going to slow down here. I'm going to delete that code here, and I'm just going to create it. In the form itself. Give it a name of save file. And what I'm doing is I'm actually looking on the backend code to see how it created the save file dialog. And then I'm going to actually try to create it. Okay, let me delete that. I'll go back to my code. And if you look here, this is exactly the same thing that I had before, and now it's working. The only difference is I didn't have the namespace. And that's interesting. By the way, that's a bug. Because if you look up here, system.windows.forms actually contains save file dialog. The whole point of this using up here is that I don't have to declare full namespace for save file dialog, but it's giving me an error, so I have to in this case.
Weird.
That's weird. Okay, unless I'm missing something, that's very bizarre. It's actually it's almost acting like there's already an object named save file dialog. Did I name? Oh, never mind. I messed up. Look,
Oh my God.
because I named my project the same
Yeah.
name as the control. I don't ever do that. That's crazy. So that's why it happened, because I named my project the same name as the control name. So now
I make mistakes like that all the time, and I know
Was that?
I make mistakes like that all the time.
Yeah, well, and
I'm
that's
like, oh, there it is. That was dumb.
and what's crazy is that students would do that and trying to figure out why it's telling you, hey, you can't. And I talked it through myself in my head to say it's acting like there's already an object named save file dialog. And I'm like, oh, duh, I named it save file dialog. So interesting. But anyway, we can do it that way. We'll just fully clarify or fully qualify the object or the class. Sorry about that. Learning process, right?
Yeah.
Hey, Phelan, how you doing, bud? Can you hear me?
Hello, good afternoon, sir.
Hey, bud. I don't know when you jumped on. I apologize. I just noticed you over there in the window. We're actually working on the save file dialog project and showing the things the students are missing. But we're quite a ways into it at this point. Hopefully I'll get the ability to save this after we're done with the conversation. And that way you can run through it. But if you're welcome to go ahead and watch and ask questions as we go through it. Any questions before I move forward?
I'm good.
Specifically, Phelan, are you okay watching? Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and move forward. I'm going to go ahead and create a couple more things that some variables that we're going to need for the project. So go ahead and say let's get the number that the end user put into our text box. And I forget what we called it. You guys remember? Count text box.
Huh? What?
I was trying to remember the name of the text box.
Oh. Okay.
Create the random number. I'm going to seed it with a 0, just in case the randomizer doesn't fire. I'm going to seed the account as well for a loop that we may create later. And also go ahead and declare a string that we're going to use to store the file name with user select when they run the save file dialog. And this is where we're going to diverge somewhat from what many students did. This is not required for full credit in the assignment. I do get this question a lot from like students that are really diving into the project and the assignments themselves. And that is, how do I set an initial directory, possible default file name, and also filters so that it only limits files that we can actually read in the save file dialog. In the event that you wanted to select a file that already existed. Excuse me.
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
So set the initial directory. Run our save file dialog object and just specify initial directory. Now, this is a little different. And this, I had a really good question from a student. I can't remember who it was. I don't think he's on the, he or she is on the chat right this second. But it basically asked, how do I get detailed information about the operating environment? And there's many ways to extract that data. But it's basically, you have to learn the libraries that are existing within the development environment you're working in. And Microsoft does include some nice tools to actually extract that environmental data. And it's literally called environment. What we want to do is get the folder path. And then we also have enums. Will actually extract your My Documents folder. So regardless of which user is using this application, it's going to actually have the ability to find that entire path, which would be like C/users/ Shane.Hamilton / My Documents.
Oh, was that in the textbook?
No.
No, okay.
And that's part of the problem, learning to code. This is going to be shocking. At least it's shocking to me. There's only 73 commands in C#. So learning to code is not terribly difficult. Now, granted, how to use those 73 commands can be confusing. I understand that. But what's really difficult about programming is the millions, and I mean millions of libraries, methods, and properties that you need to learn to be successful in creating an application. And normally it's a specific niche that you choose, like SharePoint, for example. So just understand what you're learning in these classes is very, very basic. You're trying to get the C#1 and C#2 go through very few libraries. It's almost all about how to manipulate those 73 commands, basically. And it's shockingly difficult. I mean, there are books that are 1,500 pages long discussing the ins and outs of those 73 commands. So it's kind of like a chess game, I guess, that you have to learn all your little pieces, which is very easy to do. In fact, I found a chess book when I was like in middle school, or I'm sorry, elementary school, in my uncle's basement, and I read it. That's how I learned to play chess. I've never been good at chess, ever. I can't beat anybody, but I know how pieces move. So it's kind of an example of programming. It's very easy to get the basics, right? But it's very hard to be good at it.
Oh, yeah.
And by the way, I'm terrible at chess, and I'm 52 years old.
I never play it.
I love playing. I just can't beat anybody.
At least having fun.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, next thing we're going to do is set the file name, which is going to be the file name that shows up by default. And it can be whatever you want. By the way, this is where the value of coming to a discussion really matters, because you're not going to get this out of the book. And I know a lot of the questions that students are going to ask before they even know they want to ask them. And that is an example that exists right here. And I'm going to show you why it's important. By default, Microsoft kind of dumbed down their user interface several decades ago, and they stopped you from being able to see the extensions for known file types. So when you go to look at this file in Explorer, it shows up as unknown. You don't see the .txt. So students will actually add a .txt to it, thinking, okay, that it's missing the .txt, that's why it's not working. And Microsoft then shows it as unknown.txt, but the actual file name is unknown.txt.txt. And that's a default behavior in Windows. And I'm going to show you how to change that. When I first install an operating system, and I'm going to be embarrassed here in a second because I'll tell you the story, but I don't even know if I changed that setting on this computer, because this computer I bought for $50. It was a Razor. It's a year-old Razor, but it was somebody spilled milk in it, so I bought it for $50, and I fixed it and reinstalled an operating system on it. And I haven't gone through and made all my changes yet, so maybe we'll get to do it here together today. Let's see. Next thing we're going to do, and by the way, I'm going to go back to that file name here in just a few minutes. Okay, let's go ahead and move on. Let's then set the filter. Okay. This is a little odd, but basically what it's doing is showing you the text that you want to display and then the results of what you want to filter. This is kind of bizarre because why am I filtering it by just text when I can also do all files, but I give them an option. So it's like an or. Don't get hung up on that too much in terms of the format. In fact, my format is incorrect. I'm missing an asterisk. What? Sorry. My apologies. Review that again real quick. I'm made some mistakes in typing there. I apologize. Basically, it's the display and the result separated by a pipe symbol.
Okay.
Okay, next, let's go ahead and run our save file dialog, and then we're going to actually test this. So before we actually write anything to the file, I want to make sure that everything's working and everybody's where we want them to be. Again, this is not doing anything other than getting a file name, right? So the book is very vague, in my opinion, on exactly what the save file dialog does.
Yeah, I think so too.
Okay, hang on. For some reason, my enums aren't working. Did I spell it right? Dialog. No, I did not. Yes. Okay, what we're going to do is just run that, which will debug it, test it. Put in a number, click save. And this is your dialog will look a little differently than mine because I'm again running Windows 11 and they actually changed the design a little bit. But you'll actually see that we have text files or all files as an option. We also have a default text file name of unknown.txt. You'll also notice that it drops it by default into my documents folder. Those are the three things we changed that I don't believe any of those are actually in the book.
No.
Kind of deceiving. Says save. It actually doesn't really save anything to say. It opens basically, well, prepares the file for being opened. Okay. If you are at this point having problems, you can share your screen with me so I can actually see it and try to help you through it. Otherwise, you can actually ask me questions or we can move on.
I'm okay to move on.
Okay. Marie?
I'm
Yeah.
good.
Valen, I apologize. I'm not exactly sure where you're at. I know you came in a little bit late. Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm all right. I just, I'm not in a good spot. My volume and communication is the issue right now, so I'm trying to follow along.
Okay. Do you want me to wait a minute or are you okay?
It's nothing to do with you. I'm just, I had an event on campus and I'm at the library, so just trying to get things worked out.
Gotcha. Okay. I'm gonna try it. Like I said, I'm gonna try to save it, although I'm hearing lightning. Hopefully I don't lose internet or power. But... Okay, let's go ahead and go back to the save file if statement. Let's go ahead and finish up our show lot dialog requirements. The first thing I want to do is actually get the file name that the user selected. I'm going to use this later to reopen it and read the data and put it into a list box. This is also not in the book, but that's okay if you use it in your submission. Just make sure you reference me or cite me as a reference when you do your collaboration statement, so that I know that, hey, this is why their code matches, because you used the solution that I provided. And I'm okay with that. I have no problem with students going through my videos and using my solution because they had to follow through the steps and do it themselves. So that's great. Okay, next thing we're going to do is create a random file, a randomizer, sorry. That's to create our random numbers and right before we write them into the list box. Okay, I may do something a little different here in a second. I'm going to put kind of a reminder there to do it later. Then we're going to actually go through and create our random numbers. For loop.
I have a question. I used a for loop when I did mine. And I was like, should I use a while loop or a for loop?
How dare you? No, it's fine. It really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
In fact, in terms of code, it may be cleaner if you use a shortcut for next loop. But...
Okay.
Okay. Now let's go ahead and pick a random number. Different ways to do that. But we're going to get 1 through 100. Write a single line. there's a couple different ways to do that as well. I'm gonna use the cleanest way possible, least confusing way, but there are other ways that you can actually put variables into a string without actually breaking the string up into pieces. But integrate count. And then extremely important that you close the file as soon as you're done using it. The file will actually be locked in the file system, so you won't be able to delete it or read it or do anything with it until you actually close the file. And it's actually not officially saved because of what they call atomicity and transaction control in the Windows NTFS file system. So basically what the NTFS file system in Windows 10 does is monitors the file to make sure that it's an either all or nothing, that the file doesn't get partially written. So that close basically says, okay, transaction is complete, save the file, make it available for everyone. Any questions?
No. Oh, actually, yeah. I remember when I was doing the random number equals rand.next, I wrote in the parentheses, I wrote 1,101.
Yeah.
And
That's why I mentioned there's several ways when I'm writing some code, like I mentioned during that time, that there's other ways of doing this. That's another example.
Oh.
Same thing with this. You can actually use placeholders inside the string without actually breaking the string up. And it's all okay as long as it works.
Okay, thank you.
And another thing is, not picking on anyone specifically, because I don't know who's doing it in this class, but I do know that about 10% of my students take content from the internet, Chegg, Course Hero, whatever, even friends or tutors, and they state that they worked alone. But you have to understand, when you put code out, even if you change all the variable names and all the comments, I know that the code has been used on the internet. So a student that's writing it from scratch will show up about 10 to 20%, maybe 30%, if they did it on their own without any resources, like internet resources. If you copy it from Chegg or try to use content from websites that you find solutions to, that shows up. It indicates to me that, hey, we're at 100% or 80% or 70%. So make sure you're citing. Citations go a long way. I mean, if students make a mistake and find a solution, submit it, but they cited it, there's a long way going towards, hey, making sure that that student can still get a grade for the assignment. You know what I'm saying? So it's a high number of students. I would say probably 40 to 50% of my students are finding content on the internet and using it in their projects. And I see that. It's important that you make sure you're citing it as well when you're submitting. Because if you're at 40, 50% and you cite, hey, I used Stack Exchange, I know that, hey, they copied maybe a formula or like a while loop or something and dragged it into their project, which is fine. It's completely okay to do that, right? So,
Okay.
anyways, so with that said, let's go ahead and go to, by the way, as a programmer, a large part of my career has been finding somebody else that's already solved the problem. So that is a common process. Why reinvent the wheel? But the only difference is we're in education. So we don't want you to find somebody else's solution necessarily. But in the industry, you will do that often. And it's okay, normally. Be careful with copyright.
Yeah.
Actually, I worked for Outback Steakhouse corporate headquarters in Orlando. And they actually hired me specifically because they had to fire their entire IT group that was working on their website because of copyright infringement.
Oh,
I
wow.
got sued. So, is that else? Hate message boxes. However, I didn't create a label, so we'll just do a message box. Okay, now I'm not gonna run it yet, but you're welcome to run it, and well, I'll run it. Why not? This is actually done with the first part of the assignment, and this is another thing that students miss. Okay. So the file is written, but the problem is in the assignment description, the Dropbox description, it states that you must read those files or that data back and place it in the list box. Now, some students add a button. I actually had a student this semester actually create 2 different applications, one to save it, and then another application to read the data, which is completely fine. In fact, that's the first time I've ever had a student do that, and I actually like that idea. But with that said, let's go ahead and read the data back. Open the text and what do they call it? Users file. Oh, hang on. I don't want to do that. Yeah, see. Go ahead and type that out. We're going to change something. Let's see if I can get more screen real estate. Up here where I put that folder, I have it. I'm going to read it as a text file. So down here, up here, I want to actually get the file name. And then down here, replace that with file name. It's looking for a string. I'm actually opening text using a string here. So do a while loop. Looking for the end of stream. Read the line. Remember, it's a string that I'm reading, not a number, because it's coming from a text file. Not to mention the fact I think I did. I concatenated a bunch of text with that number as well. So okay, what did I name the list box? You remember? Numbers. List box. Okay, and that should be the entire assignment in its entirety. All required functionality, including all the UI stuff that's required by the rubric. 100%.
Can you scroll down, please?
Can I slow down? I'm done.
Scroll down.
I'll
So
scroll
I
down.
can see the bottom of your code.
Sorry about that. Is that good?
That's okay. That's good.
Just noticed. Although I'd probably recommend more comments. I apologize. I was kind of brief on my comments, but I do look for comments and grading and the collaboration statement with all citations. If you're having problems, you're welcome to also send me the share to your screen. I'll stop sharing mine and I can actually walk through your code and fix it for you or help you fix it.
I finished mine, but I am gonna have to get going. I have to go pick my kids up.
Okay, were you able to get it running? Because I'm done.
Oh yeah, I got mine.
Okay,
I think in the original assignment, I kind of missed you have to write it from the text file. So I just incorporate it into the list box from the original random number within the while loop. So yeah.
okay. Very good. Nice having you. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Karen, are you okay?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm just looking at what I already did and I'm comparing it. And
Okay, very cool.
it looks good, I think. I know it runs and I the only thing I was missing, I didn't realize I had to do all of that with the alt key and the save.
You actually you would have to read. You'd have to read the rubric to actually.
Yeah, I missed that. Okay, but no, I'll pay attention to that now.
I have an MD that showed up. Not sure who that is. Let me guess, Matthew?
Oh, I have a question.
Shoot, go ahead.
It's just like in the book it shows using try and catch statements a lot, and I know in some of the zip examples on our my courses it isn't there. I mean, is that something that I should be doing a lot? I
Yes.
used it for this because I made a yes button because in mine I said, okay, do you want to view the numbers? And yes, so in the yes button I used to try and catch statement. So like if you tried to hit that before you hit the generate the numbers, it's like, okay, no, you have to go back and enter quantity of numbers.
The answer to that question is yes. That's for exception handling.
I mean, at this point, I should always have some kind of way to what is it, catch exceptions or
Right.
right? Okay.
In fact, I had by the way, I'm from the industry. I used to be a chief information officer and chief technology officer, so I had a lot of programmers under me. I actually had one programmer, and every class he ever wrote started with a try catch.
Uh-huh.
So he didn't care what it was catching, everything. I mean, it's the very first words or for text for his class was try. And the very last thing was catch. And all his code was inside that huge try catch block. Specifically to stop or to provide exception handling under any circumstance.
Oh, yeah, exception handling. That's what I was trying to
Now,
remember.
granted, he did other ones as well to capture more specific exceptions to help identify what the exact problems were. But he wanted to make sure that his program never crashed.
Okay, so that's something I need to get in a habit of doing
Yes.
all the time.
Yes.
Okay, I like that. Yeah, try and catch them, blah, blah, blah. And I think, hold on, sorry.
By the way, I don't check for try catches in grading unless the assignment is specifically calling for try catch, although you should have try.
Sure. I just want to be good at this,
Yeah. In fact, now that you say that, I should probably add that to the rubric as a grading point because they are in the industry required. I mean, you need them.
Okay. Oh, and then and what I did, not what you did. I said, oh yeah, I think you had it there. Yeah, if you said if save file dot show dialog blah blah blah. I forgot to put the else in there, but it still runs. So
Yeah.
that's me not finishing that whole thing because then that's exception handling, right?
Basically, yeah, without a try catch block, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I just all right, cool. Thank you.
It's exception handling, but it wouldn't create an exception if you cancel. I'm just providing a mechanism to alert you, hey, you canceled.
Oh, okay. All right, I get it. Thank you.
No problem.